What's up, everybody? It's Matt Johnson. We are back again with the latest episode of Real Estate Uncensored. This is the place where you get actionable ideas, insight, and inspiration to turn your real estate career into a life of freedom. And we've got a killer guest for you today. Chris Bentley is here. He is twice named the top realtor in Dallas, and he's got a great social media presence down there. And we're going to be talking about how he's built that and the radical shift in his business just over the last couple of years from buying a lot of leads, getting overextended, and shutting all that stuff down and shifting more into branding and social media. So we'll go into that in depth. Unfortunately, my co-host is not here. Greg is sadly recovering at home. He's got a massively sore throat. Otherwise, he'd be on the podcast with us. So it's just me and Chris. So first of all, Chris, officially welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I know, we're super pumped to have you. And so tell me just a little bit about where the business is right now. I mentioned some of the accolades that you've got, but what does the business look like? What's the production level? Do you have, an assistant, transaction coordinator? Just kind of give us an idea of kind of just what the structure of it is now.
I just hired a good friend of mine's brother. We actually knew each other anyway, but he's a real estate agent now. So I got kind of building a team. He's handling a lot of my smaller transactions, a lot of my rentals. So that's good. A lot of my stuff is just, flowing through. Right now, a lot of people just are kind of getting warmed up for real estate. So a lot of it's just really warm market stuff. I call it like the on deck circle. So they're on deck for the summer. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, we're recording this as of what is February 3rd or something like that, February 4th of 2019. So you've got a lot of people that are still kind of coming out of the holiday hangover, so to speak?
Yeah, their leases aren't up yet, or like they're considering selling, but their kids are still in school and they can't really do much.
Gotcha. And so tell me a little bit about your ideal client. Who do you tend to work with? What's your bread and butter?
I love working with first-time home buyers just because, you always remember your first time. And it's just, it's a fun experience getting somebody into a home. And then, usually I work with any price point. I enjoy more like the higher end, but I work with all price points. So,
and what's the higher end in Dallas? Are we talking about, is it 400K, 500K?
The middle ground's like the 450. The higher ground's like the 7,500.
Okay.
I'm
Very
sorry,
cool.
the 750.
750, yeah.
Yep.
And so tell me what was the volume last year?
It was high. I think I did what? I did 1.5 the last quarter. I'm just looking at my numbers now.
So 1.5 mil just the last quarter of 2018.
Yeah, so it was pretty good. Good
Okay.
year.
Nice.
I'm always scaling up, as you can probably tell. I had to hire people, so it's just only going to get higher.
Yeah. All right. So one of the things that we wanted to bring you on to talk about was you've had kind of an interesting roller coaster ride and a little bit of a cautionary tale for, I think, something that's going on in the industry a lot right now. And you probably went down that path because you see a lot of other people doing it, which is spending a lot of money, buying a lot of leads. Right. So I want to talk me through the process of where your business was at, sort of 18 months ago or something like that. Like, what were you buying? What were you invested in? And when you say like you were overextended, tell me a little bit about what that was like on the ground.
Yeah. So I suffer from big eyes. I get really big eyes about doing a lot of different stuff. So, and I'm an entrepreneur, so that happens. So I was like, you know what? I found a online lead service, and I don't really want to call them out, but I found them, and I bought up all the zip codes in Dallas, just about all of them in Collin County, which is north of Dallas. And I was like, you know what, this is the year, like I'm going to really dominate. And I was spending thousands of dollars every single month, and my phone essentially wasn't ringing. And the people that did ring were probably 6 months or a year out from actually buying. So it got to the point where, I had to shut it all down. But before that, you're locked into a contract. So at the time, I leased a car, and, before you know it, I was literally like 30 days away from moving into my brand new leased car, which was terrible. So, I think the cautionary tale is that A, you have to build up a brand, and then B, it takes time. It's patience. And I think that a lot of people really don't really understand that. You hear me say patience, but you don't understand it. It takes time.
Yeah. So walk me through a little bit. I want to know a little bit about your thinking process when you were scaling up and kind of buying the leads in those zip codes. Were you
Uh,
expecting those to turn, in 3 months, 2 to 3 months? Were you expecting to get enough of those to get like the short-term hits, or were you expecting the long-term and it just didn't turn quickly enough?
the first year I did it, which was the previous year, was successful. I built, I had a lot of clients, people were turning over, I was paying for the leads, and I was getting ROI back. So that was great. What happened was that the lead company failed. They got essentially like delisted from Google, and anybody that goes on like, you know, looking for houses for sale in Dallas, their
Okay.
name wouldn't pop up on the first page.
Hmm.
So if nobody's looking at it, and I'm spending money on it, then it's just, it's a waste.
Okay.
Um, so that's essentially what happened to the whole
Hmm.
situation. But I was locked in, so I couldn't be like, "Oh, this sucks," and let me go try something different. Like
Mhm.
you're locked in.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what happened.
Interesting. Okay. So yeah, so it wasn't that. I think a lot of people fall into that a similar trap, but it's different. I want to explain why. When you buy leads online through Google Pay Per Click and other means, a lot of agents go into it with the expectation that it is going to turn over relatively quickly, or at the very least, they'll be able to cherry pick the top leads off the cream of the crop and just only work with those if they pay for enough leads. And in the past, that was true. I don't know that it's so much true now, because now people are registering on 5 or 10 different sites and they're starting their home search online where we can see them way earlier than we used to see them. Like we're seeing them 12 to 18 months out now, where it used to be they'd be a couple months out. So like the dynamic has massively shifted, but I think a lot of people make that same mistake. You tested it out and it was working for a while and then it didn't work due to things that were outside of your control. I feel like there's a lot of agents out there who go into it, don't test it out first, and make a very similar, they end up with a very similar result, but not because that was the company's fault, it's because it was their own fault for having the wrong expectations going into it. And so I think that this is something that can easily happen to a lot of other agents out there, and I think it probably has. We just don't talk about it publicly very much, which I love that you're willing to just come on and just share like, hey, I screwed up and here's how I fixed it. So I want to get to that in a second. But tell me a little bit about like the low point, and how did you come to the decision of like getting out of it or cutting that off, and how did you decide what to do about that problem?
The low point, I mean, there was a ton of them, but friends would call me and they want to go out, or like, I'm a single dude, so girls want to go out and have a good time, and I'm like, oh well, like you can come over and like we can play some Xbox, like it was so bad.
Would you like to
And
go for a hike? Yeah, I can.
yeah,
You'll have to
I was
buy
like,
your own water.
uh, I was like, what kind of free alternatives do I have here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's just, and then at one point I was just eating eggs and bacon every single like morning, noon, and night,
Okay.
and it's just because it's the cheapest thing that
Yeah, I
you
was
could
going to say
possibly
that sounds like a good primal diet, but
do.
yes, it's also relatively cheap.
Yeah, so like as I got like coronary disease, I realized that this wasn't it wasn't the right deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just from there I was like, look, like it failed. Like it's my L.
Hmm.
I'm about to get kicked out of my apartment. Like I essentially all my money is into this thing. There's no way out. Like I have to
Hmm.
get some sort of relief, and that's just stop the hemorrhaging. And
Hmm.
I had to go get a job. Like it was terrible. You have to
Yeah.
swallow your pride and like go take whatever is available. So,
Yeah.
and it sucked for me because people were like, like, what are you doing? Like, I had to find some place that like nobody knew who I was,
Yeah.
because you do so
Yeah.
many marketing as a realtor, your name pops up. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah. So that was a low point. So you get a job, you basically stop the hemorrhaging, stop the bleeding, cut off the payments, to the lead source and all that stuff. So you get that straightened out. So you're looking around, you're going, okay, well, I'm working a job. I've got a little bit of a social media presence out there. At least when I come up, when people search for an agent, I do come up. How did you decide that you're going to like really put the I guess the gas pedal down, so to speak, on online branding? Because there's a million different options. There's a million different ways you could have decided to go. And what was it about that?
I just found out it kind of worked. I mean, I got a lot of social media training by a guy named Ryan Stewman, hardcore closer. I just dropped that, and then Gary Vee's real popular, so I watch all of his stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's really how I turned it around. Was people were still referring me business. So even though I took this huge L and I lost and like broke, people were still referring me business because the talent is still there. it was,
Okay.
I'm still like a good agent. So
Hmm.
people were like, oh, I know that guy, he's good, and refer me business. And then I just kind of built it back up where I stayed away from that and then just kept the referral business going in terms of like being out in public, not so much partying, but like, doing events, being at events, like shaking people's hands, talking to people, trying to help people. Because, if you help somebody like either with their business or get a job or just do something small, they'll keep you in mind.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about how you really decided to lean into it. So, when you say, okay, well, this is working already, now I want to do more of it. You ended up with a YouTube channel that's got something like 80 videos on it, and you've also got a decent following on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. So, where did you kind of decide where to focus your energies, and what's been most effective for you?
I would just, it was the lowest part. So I was like, well, what could I do that's free?
Hmm.
And I was like, well, I could post, and I could, just talk about the struggle and be real as I could possibly be, and just like go out and do it, and there's nobody stopping you, so you can go out and create content. Stuff that's worked for me is just a lot of posting, um, not worrying about what other people say, not worrying about likes or people unfollow you because they will.
Hmm.
Just going out and doing it. I'm more committed to podcasting. Before I was really committed to video. You just kind of evolve. So I just kind of see kind of where the market's going. So if there's an abundance of one thing, then I'll kind of go do something different, and
Hmm.
then people will catch up to that, and then I'll kind of switch back.
Hmm.
Um, at one point I was like writing blogs on a website that is no longer up. Just anything I could do to just draw some attention.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's an interesting perspective. I don't hear a lot of people say that. Like if I see something that's getting a lot of attention, I'll go do the other thing, the opposite thing, right? And most people, because of confirmation bias and stuff like that, they won't do the opposite thing. That takes them a while. They want to see what the bandwagon is, and then they'll jump on the bandwagon. And the problem is their voice gets lost among the other thousands of people who are also on that same bandwagon. So Gary Vee says to go post on Snapchat, and we all go post on Snapchat. Nobody sees or cares what we're posting on Snapchat, right? When all the attention, right? If you do something different, like there may be some attention there on Snapchat, and that's fine. But there's still a ton of attention on Facebook, and there's still a ton of attention on podcasting and in some of these other ways. So I love that you go, okay, let's see where everybody is running to, and then let's do something different, right? Because that's where you have a better chance of being found. So I think that's a really key point that people can take away. So tell me a little bit about when you say just like posting and just getting attention and stuff like that. Um, how do you follow up on that, right? So how do you follow up on the posting on Facebook and Instagram? Does that translate into people reaching out to you directly, or are you initiating conversations on social media that end up turning into something?
I've done both. I would post something that I think is really good, like a good value in terms of a home, and then somebody's like looking at it like, oh wow, like that is like might not be able to afford that home, or I might not be interested in that particular property, but I know somebody that is, or I actually have this house and I've been trying to sell, but nobody else can sell it. Just a
Mhm.
lot of that stuff. I've also done, I am to a lot of people and being like, hey, I'll buy you, you and your, significant other or a guest or whatever, dinner at whatever restaurant you like if you know somebody that's looking to list their home.
Mhm.
Just small stuff, and that's
Mhm.
actually turned out well.
Has it really?
Just a lot of people. Yeah, I mean, you're just
Mhm.
asking for business, but you're doing it in a non-confrontational way, which is not what people would do on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're like, it's like, hey, if you do have something, like, let me know and I'll buy you something. It's like it's a
Mhm.
scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of deal.
Yeah.
Versus just like, hey, like, do you know anybody who wants to buy a house? Like, of course I do, but I'm not gonna give them to you.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
And when you're branding yourself online, what do you feel like you're known for? To the circle of people where you are kind of micro famous in Dallas, what do they think of you as? Do they think of you as the first time home buyer guy? Do they think of you as something else, like some other specialty? Do they think about it in terms of the types of homes you sell? What do you feel like you've built your brand around?
Luxury,
Really?
absolutely luxury.
Nice.
Yeah, I show a lot of like $1 million homes. That's what I like. I watched a lot of $1 million listing LA and Josh Flagg and those guys. So like that's what I like to do.
Hmm.
5 years I may change. Maybe it's like, I don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
But that's what I like doing. It's just fun. It's a fun challenge to see if I can move something that big.
Okay. And so you're posting videos, posting pictures of the types of properties that you are both actively listing. Are you getting out there and touring properties that are listed by other people and taking pictures and sharing stuff like that? So it's not just your own stuff.
I do a lot of my broker stuff. So if he
Yeah.
has some really nice properties, I'll show that.
Yeah.
It's
That makes sense.
you try not to do your own. Try not to do other people's stuff just because it's a conflict.
Okay. But within your own brokerage, there, listings by other agents, you'll go out and tour their properties and stuff like that. Cool.
Absolutely.
Makes sense. Awesome, man. Well, what's the next step? Let's talk about kind of how are you, like, where are you directing your time and your resources and your attention to kind of put, like, to, keep putting the pedal to the metal and take the next step.
Still social media. I find that LinkedIn's really popular right now because nobody's really on it as much.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are doing YouTube pre-rolls, which is
Mm-hmm.
cool. I just think that there's some other value, some other ways. Like right now, I'm building a lot of websites and a lot of like SEO on the back end and stuff.
Hmm.
I've been seeing a lot of like traffic that way because a lot of people aren't doing it.
So what do you mean
I'm
by
just doing.
building websites, or are you talking about building backlinks by being a guest on podcasts and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of stuff. So like
Okay.
I have my website, which, I run SEO to, and then of course, like I'll be, on this show, which is
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. And then I'll run some backlinks to that. So like if somebody, Googles my name, they'll see that there's like a ton of content. They'll be like, oh, wow, this guy is really doing something. And that's what I've always made my money on, was just not having like a couple lines on Google, but
Mm-hmm.
having a ton of content so they can be like, wow, there's like 4 or 5 different pages of Chris Bentley. I feel like I really know the guy
Mm-hmm.
versus, one or two things. So,
Yeah, I think if a real estate agent was to ask me the value of being interviewed on a podcast that is for the industry, right? This podcast isn't going out to buyers and sellers in Dallas, right? So I think a lot of people would go, well, what's the value to Chris? Chris isn't coaching agents. He's not selling anything to this audience of people. So what's the value to him? To me, that's one of the big ones, right? Not only is it setting you up for some of those other things later, but at the very least, just right now, it's a super high credible link to your website and credibility, and it gives you something to post about on social media. Like, hey, so excited. I was interviewed on Real Estate Uncensored today. I'm really pumped. It'll come out in a few weeks. I'm excited for you to hear it. We talked about this, this, and this. Even if nobody actually pays attention to the actual episode when it comes out in your audience of buyers and sellers, because they don't necessarily care, what they do care about is they want their guy to be somebody. Right? Everybody wants to work with someone who is somebody, who is micro famous, even if it's not in their circle, but they want to know they're working with somebody that's kind of micro famous in some circle. And so to any agent who's like thinking like, what's the value of doing this? To me, that's one of the best ones. Is it boosts your credibility. And Chris, I'm sure you've seen this, like when you're dealing with luxury homeowners, to me, there's not a lot of things that are different. But I do feel like that is one thing that's a little bit more different than the average homeowner, is that luxury homeowner wants to know that they're dealing with another high level person, whatever that means to them. They just want to know that you're in their caliber of person. Does that, I don't know if you've found that to be true, but I think that's, from what I've seen, it's true.
yeah, you're exactly right. And it's also who's your audience. That's the biggest thing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
as you sell luxury homes, it's like, who do you know that can afford this property?
Right.
And on podcasts, I've gotten people from like Wyoming reach out that are like, hey, look, I'm looking to relocate to Dallas. Like,
Hmm.
could you help me out? Or I build up my friends, and same thing with you, vice versa. Like
Mm-hmm.
this podcast will get picked up and somebody will be like, oh, wow, like that was a really good show. Maybe I'll get on it, or like
Mm-hmm.
I'll like this show. So, I mean, it just all comes back around. Like you can't be like very first time. I always get referrals off the second person. Like I know you now, we're good friends. And then all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, somebody that wants to do business with me, which is
Yeah.
how it works.
Yeah, like very casual connections. I 100% agree with that. There's a big study built on that a lot of referrals come from those types of connections. It's not always your deepest relationships necessarily. It's the people that are kind of your like friends of friends, and they hear about you from someone that they do trust, that you do have a deep relationship with. And then they go, Chris, I feel like I remember that being that guy in Dallas. Like, Chris, that's his name. Let me get you in touch with Chris. And then all of a sudden you've got a referral from somebody you really didn't think about. And it's not somebody you have a deep relationship with, but it's like one step removed from a deep relationship that you do have. And so that's another way to look at it. And like I said, with referrals especially, that's another reason to kind of be a guest on industry podcasts like this, is just building relationships and building a name with other agents just makes it more and more likely that you'll get referrals if you live in a city that's worth moving to, which obviously Dallas is. So I want to finish out with a couple of things. I've got a couple of things to mention, but let's take a step back for a second. And Chris, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
You can go to my website. It's Chris D as in danger Bentley.com. All over social media, Chris D Bentley, and then Chris D Bentley on Instagram. Anywhere I'll reach out. LinkedIn. I'm not really too much on Snapchat, but if you Google my name, believe me, you'll find me.
Yeah, exactly. And same for the show, Real Estate Uncensored. You can Google us and find us anywhere on any platform and leave us a rating and review and all that good stuff. Make sure to give Chris a shout out in the reviews, just to thank him for his time and his contribution. And then just remember, the show is brought to you and supported by WiseHire. So if you're in Chris's position where you're starting to hire people to help you, whether it's the admin side or you're bringing in another agent to help you with the sales side, maybe you want to give them some leads and have them take some of the burden off of you. That's essentially what WiseHire makes very easy to do. So they'll help you with, they've got ad templates so you can post it in your area. They'll screen everybody out and they match everybody up to the disc profile to make sure that it weeds out all the people who are not worth talking to for that specific role that you're hiring. And then basically weeds out all those and only serves up the very, very cream of the crop. And then you follow up and have a conversation with them. So it streamlines that whole process. So that's WiseHire. And then, so that's about it for the show and for the calls to action that we want to give. So Chris, let's finish this episode with this. So if you look at the different places, you mentioned that you're not super active on Snapchat and you're starting to look at LinkedIn a little bit more often. What do you think of doing on LinkedIn that you feel like would produce more business for you if you put a little bit of extra time there?
More content. I used to do a lot of video, and that was okay, but it's very picture oriented. LinkedIn is. So if you get a picture kind of rolling, it goes kind of viral. A lot of my, I say not a lot, but a lot of the better properties get probably about 4,000 to 6,000 views. So if you can get that pretty on a consistent basis, people will reach out to you just because they'll see your stuff.
Yeah. And I really haven't heard of luxury agents looking to LinkedIn, and I've never heard anybody quote those types of numbers, which is really, really good. So if it's the right property, it's a good looking property, it's a luxury property in your area, get that thing up on LinkedIn, share it, message some people that you think might be interested in helping you share it, and see if you can get some traction that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are on LinkedIn more than Facebook that are more executives and CEOs, CCOs, because it's more professional.
Yep.
And then it's they're able to have it up during the weekday, like at their office, versus like Facebook is kind of frowned upon at the office. So
yeah,
it's kind of cool.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in LinkedIn, and I think there's a huge opportunity there for a lot of agents that we're missing out on. So yeah, you will not find a bigger proponent of LinkedIn than I am. So if you want more detail on that, if anybody's listening, go back and listen to. We've done a couple of episodes with a gal named Tracy Enos, ENOS. Those are really, really good. So you talk about the content approach. That's what Tracy specializes in, is helping people really amp up their content strategy on LinkedIn. So if that's what you feel like is work for you, Chris, and people want to emulate what you're doing and what you're doing more of, those episodes would be great to go back and review. So with that being said, Chris, I appreciate it. Thanks for doing this episode of the show with us.
Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.